The polls are closed, the votes are being counted, and U.S. military leaders are lauding the success of the Iraqi elections. Also, parts of Naval Air Station Sigonella are several feet underwater, and air leaders say its new F-22A Raptor is now ready for operational takeoff. Hello everyone, I'm Air Force Sergeant Sean Lehman. Thanks for joining us. Topping today's headlines, a landmark day in Iraq. Elections were held around the country Thursday with an estimated 15 million people casting their vote, helping decide how the country's new government will be formed. Sergeant Jake Newman shows us how Iraqis took another big step toward becoming a free country.
I'm very happy.
You're very happy?
Yes.
Sounds of joy and celebration echoed throughout Iraq. Thursday's elections left many Iraqis with a great sense of pride.
I am here as hero.
This was the first time Iraqi citizens were allowed to select a permanent government since the fall of Saddam Hussein. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld says initial indications are the elections were a huge success.
And that is just an historic accomplishment. It's greatly to the credit of the Iraqi people for the courage they've shown, and it's certainly to the credit of the men and women in uniform.
Officials reported a massive turnout, but there was little violence around the country. A possible sign Iraqi security forces are making progress since they were in charge of security this time. A reporter in Iraq with the American Forces Press Service describes what he saw.
No American troops were in the polling places or even, but they were standing by in case the Iraqis needed them. And they never needed them. The Iraqi police and soldiers and public order battalions managed to maintain security very well.
U.S. military leaders and service members in Iraq say the elections are a culmination of the hard work they've done. They say seeing the election process up close emphasizes why the U.S. military is in Iraq in the first place.
They can see the Iraqi people enjoying the same freedoms and same liberties that we enjoy. It gives them a sense of mission accomplishment, understanding that their mission is not simply to provide security, but to bring a better life to the people of Iraq.
Anybody that was skeptical there, I think, would see the hope here if they were here in person and meet very, very jubilant Iraqis. It's just a fact.
Now that the votes are in, the next step is to count them. The Iraqi Election Commission says results should be out in the next 2 weeks. Staff Sergeant Jake Newman, Pentagon Channel News.
With more Iraqis casting a vote in this, the third election day this year, Iraqi security forces took the lead protecting their own. Iraqi police provided security inside the polling places, while Iraqi army units stayed outside to search voters before they entered the buildings. One of the former commanders overseeing the training of the Iraqi security forces talked to the Pentagon Channel Wednesday and said the Iraqis were fully capable of keeping the elections safe.
As they have gone through the January elections and the October elections and provided the bulk of the security for both of those elections, it would be natural to have them accept more responsibility now for the third set of elections tomorrow so that they can plan and provide a greater amount of security than before.
General Richard Sherlock left his post in Iraq in November and is currently the Deputy Chief of the Army Reserve. Meanwhile, the man who commands U.S. troops in Iraq says, quote, "The Iraqi people had a great day on Election Day." General George Casey spoke via satellite from Iraq to a town hall meeting at the Pentagon. Marine Corporal Brian Buckwalter has the story.
Most of the attention at the one-hour town hall meeting was on Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Peter Pace. But the gathering also heard from General George Casey in Iraq, who described a mood of optimism in Iraq during Election Day.
And the sentiment was really set this morning when there was an IED attack against a polling site in Karma. And the Iraqis went out, repaired the wall, and were open for voting at 7. And that's the spirit that led the day.
He went on to describe the progress in Iraq during the last 3 years as unprecedented, but said many challenges still lie ahead.
And there'll be a debate on the Constitution, amending it in the first 6 months of next year. And there'll be a debate on federalism. And I would expect both of those to be fairly divisive.
Following General Casey's remarks, Secretary Rumsfeld and General Pace both fielded questions. The Secretary took issue with recent reports in the media suggesting the U.S. Army is broken.
There's never been an Army as well-trained, as well-led, as well-equipped as the Army we have today. And because of the changes that are being undertaken in the Department of Army, it's going to get better every month as we go through the period ahead.
General Pace also predicts improvements ahead for the Army National Guard.
What the Army is doing with the National Guard is ensuring that every single National Guard unit is properly manned, trained, and equipped. That is a huge undertaking to ensure that we do that right. And I have great faith in General Schoonmaker and Lieutenant General Blum and all those who are working to make that happen.
Marine Corporal Brian Buckwalter, Pentagon Channel News.
Since 1955, the Department of Defense has been monitoring the voting practices of its service members and civilian workers, particularly the ones living overseas. Congress passed the Federal Voting Assistance Act back then to encourage absentee registration and voting, even during a deployment. Now, 50 years later, Congress has received its 17th report from DoD, outlining how well the military is exercising its right to vote. Air Force Sergeant Ed Cook has more.
Polling results from about 30,000 service members and overseas citizens show 2004 was a banner year for the voting process.
We saw in 2004 the highest voting participation rate in the history of the program.
Every 4 years, the Federal Voting Assistance Program sends out a survey trying to find any existing problems and solve them.
Are we carrying out a good program? Are the voters' needs being met? Are they having a successful voting experience?
According to the latest report from the Federal Voting Assistance Program, 79% of service members voted, with more than half casting a ballot while deployed. Defense officials say more voter education workshops and the work of voting assistance officers helped boost election participation.
The command support was incredible this year. On all the military installations and at the embassies and consulates. And people were focused on voting and letting people know that they had an opportunity to vote.
But one of the other key factors, the internet. It was useful for getting information to prospective voters and for actually casting a ballot. Currently, 49 states and territories accept some form of electronic transmission, like registration forms. 33 email blank ballots, and 24 accept emailed ballots.
We're still pressing for legislation in states to make the process easier for our citizens, and what we're trying to do is simplify the process.
Because the simpler it is to cast a ballot, the more likely voters in 2004 will be voters in each year after that.
Their vote is so important to their lives. They are electing people who affect public policy.
If you want to vote and are having trouble, you're asked to contact your local voting assistance officer. Air Force Sergeant Ed Cook, Pentagon Channel News.
Folks living at Naval Air Station Sigonella, Sicily are trying to dry off after Mother Nature dumped several feet of rain in the area. Sergeant Jimmy Benson has more on conditions in the area.
As if living under the shadow of an active volcano wasn't enough, recent heavy rainfall has resulted in flooding on board Naval Air Station Sigonella, Sicily, and surrounding areas, including government housing units, where up to 3 feet of standing water has been reported. Steps are being taken to evacuate housing residents as necessary. In addition, shelter-in-place plans for military and civilian personnel at both NAS-1 and NAS-2 are ready to be activated if required. Following processing, families will be assigned temporary lodging in local hotels. Flooding has rendered many local roads impassable. NAS-2, including the airfield, remains closed and is expected to open shortly. For the Pentagon Channel, from the Naval Media Center, I'm Sergeant Jimmy Benson.
A seaman missing since World War II for more than 60 years is finally back home. The Department of Defense POW Missing Personnel Office says the remains of Seaman Second Class D. Haas of Sierra, Oklahoma has been identified and returned to his family for burial at Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery in San Antonio, Texas. We'll be right back.